Inspired by the work of Edith Cowan, we set out in 1991 to transform lives through education and research, giving our students the tools they need to take on the world. We've come a long way in our 30 years, growing into a modern, vibrant university and accomplishing some pretty incredible things. We've earned a spot in the top 100 young universities worldwide, with our teaching quality consistently ranked among the best in Australia. Our campuses have world-class facilities for teaching and research, with great places to study and relax. And the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts at ECU is one of the most celebrated performing arts academies in the world. We pride ourselves on our forward thinking, delivering up-to-date theory and skills to tackle the problems of tomorrow. And with the announcement of the new ECU City Campus, our future looks brighter than ever.
A more complex sound still is white noise.
Tell me, what's the story behind the film? How did you come to make this kind of, to me, it's like a homage to kind of exploitation movies and cult movies?
Yeah, I think that to a large degree, it's just a distillation of the things that I love. So it wasn't that I intended to make an exploitation homage so much as that's just the way the story came out, and it's informed by in a large degree to the things that I love. So even down to like the colors and things like that wasn't intentional. It's just when it came time to do it, that's what movies I like look like. So that's how we ended up with the thing that it is. And you know, to a great degree, it's still practicing. Like I'm you know, a relatively new filmmaker, and I'm still learning how to do this stuff. So in a way, this is my film school, but I wouldn't want to subject anyone to my student efforts unless I thought that it was entertaining in some way, and hopefully people are entertained by it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fantastically entertaining. I mean, there's such a joy watching it. You mentioned film school, so I mean, you're totally self-taught, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what made you pick up a camera and do this?
Well, you know, I always wanted to be a filmmaker my entire life, and somehow ended up opening a record store instead, and I've worked selling records my entire life. And you eventually get to an age where you start to look back and you're putting your life into perspective, and you think about the things that you wanted to do and never did. And that was the big one. And when I was in college and wanted to be a filmmaker, it was prohibitively expensive. You know, you were shooting on 16 millimeter film back then. And, you know, just to pay for your film and processing costs, you know, would be about $50,000. And that's before you're adding on, you're paying actors or, you know, props or anything. You can make a film for nothing. I kind of got to a point in my life, was like, what am I waiting for? Because it's totally doable.
The availability of technology, like you say, you can shoot on a phone, and like that ability to, you know, realize that's what you want to do, and you get that ability to like focus in your ideas and your ambitions at that point in your life where you're like, I want to do this. I think that just really kind of, I guess that combines to create that energy, that momentum to do something, doesn't it? It's like that kind of I guess everything comes together at that point and it just works.
Well, sure, you know, and I have the benefit of having these ideas, for my entire life, that I always thought, like, well, that would be really cool if that was in a movie. And so I can draw, on that when it finally came down to being able to do it. Now, of course, you're limited by your budget. So, it's not like I could put a bunch of explosions or there. And I think I still have,
I guess your imagination is the only limit you've got. Once you realize that, you can just do anything. It's like, yeah, well, I can't have an explosion. What kind of crazy stuff can I have happen? What can happen next? Because you've got more happening in the first 1 minute than most Hollywood films have in an hour. I guess you've got this ambition, you've got this imagination, technology is there. How did you go about writing the film? What was that process that got it from inside there, inside your head, inside your imagination, out onto paper and then onto the screen?
Bad Girls started out as a script called Girl Gang Rampage, which was a screenplay written by my friend Shane Silman, who plays Danny Lucifer in the movie. And we had tried to produce that play, and it sort of fell through at the last minute with the venue. And the script sat on a shelf for years. And when it came time for me to do my second film, I remembered that script. It was way too campy to be produced as a film. It was definitely a very campy stage production. But I liked some of the characters and scenes. So I asked Shane if he was okay with me taking that script and sort of borrowing some characters and scenes and then redeveloping it and sending it in a little bit of a different feed, because I'm a big fan of road movies, and borrowing not really any particular scene from like 70s and 80s exploitation films, but definitely borrowing the feel and the attitude, but trying to set it, in a modern time, so that it didn't just seem like a throwback, because I didn't want to make like I didn't want to make a grindhouse movie in the sense of it being this sort of throwback homage thing, even though I am liberally borrowing ideas, and so that's what we did, and hopefully it turned out as something original and not derivative, at least too much.
No, I think it's definitely original. I mean, there's so many different elements that are unique and coming together and playing together differently. So how did you fund it? You did Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, well, Indiegogo, which is basically the same thing.
Right,
yeah, we just put it out there, and we had some kind of angel investors that kicked in a few generous donations to it, and yeah, it was pretty much entirely crowdfunded, and actually, so the budget was $16,000. That's what we spent on it, and we did a little bit better. So like miraculously, the film has turned a profit at this point, which is crazy to me. And so any extra money we have will certainly go to doing the next one.
That's great. That's great that you've got into profit already. I think that's a lesson for any kind of emergent filmmaker. Is just follow your dream, because it can work. You can make it work, which is great. I think one of the things that I really like about the film, and you mentioned this when we were talking a minute ago, was the color. And I wonder if you it's so lurid. It's wonderful. It's like,
Yeah, and again, it's not like I was trying to mimic anything. It's just that in my mind, that's what movie colors are supposed to look like. But it's funny when I look at it and I compare it to any independent film from 2021. It doesn't look the same. I think I'm definitely funneling some sort of 70s film stock through my mind when I think that's supposed to look like, and that's just what sort of comes out in the film. But there was never an attempt to duplicate a color from any other film. It's just that's what I thought it was supposed to look like.
Oh, no, I think that's great. That idea that you just watched this fantastic world of cinema and you've internalized this kind of color scheme, this kind of lurid color scheme. Which
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think that's what cinema should be about. It's internalizing, and then spitting out your own kind of version of cinema,
Yeah, I think that the magic happens when you get it a little bit wrong, because that's when it becomes something new. Is you have an idea of what it's supposed to sound like or look like, but then you spit out this thing that isn't really a duplication, but it's some new version of that.
Yeah. And so I've got to ask you, how did you cast the film? How did you go about finding these people who are willing to be in this film?
Well, I live in a pretty small town, and so there's not a large talent pool here. And particularly if you're working on a really low budget, we paid everyone, but the pay that we offered was very low, and it's also not really an easy production. There's a lot of action and minor stunt work. So we just kind of put out a call on social media and just got really lucky. We found the best people we could find in our relatively small town that were willing to work for almost nothing, and they just turned out to be great. In my opinion, I did look at a lot of people, because I think casting is one of the most important aspects of filmmaking, and so I think I looked at 100 people before I decided on Morgan as the lead, and really, I guess probably like 100 to 150 people before I decided on the three main girls.
Okay, that's a lot of people for a small town.
Yeah, and well, a lot of people, our casting call sort of got out through social media, and so we had a lot of people from all over the country that were submitting videos, but I wasn't going to cast anyone from outside of my area, just because working on such a low budget, if you have to cancel a day and reschedule it, it's impossible if it's someone who's like flying in from out of state. So we did try to keep it all local, and it just happened to work out pretty good. I'm really proud of all the performances in it. I think everybody really stepped up and did a great job.
Was the cast was all local? Was the crew local as well? Everyone is local from the film?
Sure, everybody that worked on the movie lives within a 100-mile radius. So that, but most live within like 20 miles.
And I mean, is there like a strong filmmaking community where you are?
There's a couple of people doing films, but I wouldn't say that it's a strong community, in that it's not like a super tight knit community here. But like I live about I live about 3 hours from Atlanta, which is a giant filmmaking hub in the United States.
So, because I'm interested, because you said you had 100 people and all these people part of the film, and there seems to be a sensibility to it. So I wondered if like you had like a local, groups of people where you'd go and act in their films and then they'd act in your films. That kind of...
There's a degree of crossover. I mean, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 other guys making feature films in my area, and so a lot of the actors do cross over between the different productions. If you're an actor living in Columbia, South Carolina, you're gonna find work. It just doesn't pay very well.
Right. Do you ever act in people's films?
I've had bit parts in both of my own films, but I've never acted in anyone else's.
Okay. Because that's one of those things I think you see, that when you see like indie films and underground films where people that kind of community grows, and you see people appearing in each other's films and so on, and
Right.
there's that sense of like something slowly growing and bubbling up.
Yeah, I'm much happier behind the camera. Uh, I've only appeared in my own films just as maybe a show of camaraderie with my other actors.
Okay, so so with this film, there's obviously quite a lot of effects in it, and there's a lot of gore and stuff. So who did all the
Mhm.
special effects? Who was doing that?
Um, a couple of different people, but the ones that were really good was this kid named Hayden Bogan, who's from Charleston, South Carolina, and he's a young kid who's just sort of learning how to do this stuff, and he's really talented. I think he's definitely has a future ahead of him because some of the stuff he did really blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I like about a film like this is it's got the the sex and the violence and the the car chases and the cross journey trip, and then the gunfights and so on, and just that whole energy that's there. And I think that there's a really nice kind of sensibility to that, and I just think that the way in which you use those elements with it never becoming too heavy handed was just really nice. It kind of really kind of it gave it a really nice feel to watch it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I feel like if I had more money, I probably would have been more heavy-handed. Like I wouldn't have been able to control myself. So maybe it's good that I'm working on such a small budget.
But I mean, that's an interesting thing to say though, because there is that. Yeah, I think that when people have limitations, they test themselves and what can they do? How can you make something work with less money? How can you make it work with less equipment? And I think that once you have that ability to think, it's that gets us, indie record labels, indie films, all those things come from people. How can we do this? I just find
Right. Yeah, I think that's, to me, the whole history of exploitation film. Why those films are so interesting is because the lack of budget made them come up with crazy ideas, uh, things that Hollywood would never consider because they had to, attract attention and get eyeballs on their work. And the only way to do that, if you don't have the money for a big star or insane special effects, is just to come up with something crazy, and provide enough of those crazy points in the movie that people have something to talk about when they leave the theater. And that's how these movies would always sort of blow up, especially the better ones that got a lot of attention, because people were leaving the theater just in awe. They couldn't believe what they had seen, and all that comes from lack of budget. All that comes from just trying to come up with something insane no one's ever seen before, because you don't have any other resources other than your imagination. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm coming from with this, is that entire history of exploitation cinema, where it was all about coming up with an idea that would either shock or titillate the audience.
That's great. I mean, to me, that's just what's so great about that excitement that you have when you're young and you go to the cinema and it's a late night and the lights go down, and that excitement, and it's like, you don't know what's going to happen. It's totally unpredictable. So a film like this
Right.
really speaks to me because it's got that same element to it. It totally relates to that same kind of joy that I have. So, putting in that VHS cassette or sitting in that cinema as the lights go down at midnight.
Right. And
But
it's, you're not watching Lawrence of Arabia. Uh, you're quite aware that you're not watching, a fine film. It is what it is, but it's like a roller coaster ride. And if you have fun, and if there's enough of those points in there that really sort of like make your eyes get wide, then when it's over, you're talking to your friend that you're there with, and you're rehashing your favorite elements. I think that's the key to a great film, is that you just have something to talk about when it's over. And so that I tried really hard with this to at least throw a few zingers in there, so that somebody had something to discuss when they left the theater.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me. I mean, there's so many elements like that you can just talk about, like, just even down to the relationship of the two policemen.
Uh-huh.
It's, and it's just so he's always eating, and yeah.
Everybody brings that up, and I'm really glad that people have noticed that and point that out, because that was just sort of a last minute thing, to have him just and having him eating absurd things like a can of sauerkraut. He's eating a pickle in one scene. But everybody has really picked up on that, and they seem to love that about that character.
So when did you finish making the film? Was it pre-COVID or post-COVID?
Oh yeah, it was we were so lucky. We finished shooting 2 weeks before we locked down. And I was so thankful. And the lockdown was great for editing, because I didn't have anything better to do than to sit in a room and edit.
So have you ever seen it in the cinema with an audience?
Yes, once. We're still kind of opening back up over here, and so we were at the Grindsploitation Festival here in Virginia, and but because we're still kind of coming out of lockdown, it wasn't a very well attended festival. There was maybe 20 people in the theater. So, but even being able to sit in a theater with 20 people and watching it's you see where people laugh, and sometimes things will get a laugh that you weren't expecting, and that's really cool. Oh yeah, I think for a filmmaker to be able to sit in a theater and reassess their own work through other people's eyes, and you see what's connecting and what's not, I think that's really the only way to improve as a filmmaker.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because you get that experience of
To
sorry, yeah, you get that experience of when the lights go down, watching hearing everyone, seeing their excitement. It must be like, for a film like this, because to me a film like this, really, it's an audience film. It's you sit there and you can just you can imagine that people were just going to be getting really excited, and cheering and laughing, and like you say. So for a filmmaker, that must just be a real.
yeah,
Sorry, go on. Yeah.
I was just saying that I think this film works best with an audience.
Yeah, no, you can see that aspect to it. You really can. So this is now going out, obviously, around the world. What's you got happening next? Are you working on another film yet?
Yeah, right now I'm working on a music video for a heavy metal band called Demiser, who are about to blow up really big, I think. And so that's where I'm at right now. As soon as I'm done editing that, then I'm sitting down to write the next film. I have 3 different ideas for a feature that I just need to pick one and then sit down and hash it out.
Cool. Oh, that's great. And you're still working at the record store?
Yeah, I've been advised not to quit my day job.
But it must be good working in a record store, right? Being a filmmaker in a record store,
Well,
being the coolest guy in town.
Yeah, right. It pays in cool points, not so much in money, but it's okay. Records are my first great love, and I like being around it. It's just that it's I don't really have a great amount of wealth from my work in the record store, but it's fun.
But I mean, you've got, again, though, like watching the film, you've got this great soundtrack. There's a sense, of music in the film.
Yeah, and that comes from, I have played in bands most of my life. I'm not in any bands now, but when I was younger, I played in bands, and I've always been connected to the music scene. So, when it comes to make a film, and you need music for the soundtrack. Well, if you know all the cool bands in town, and then you can pick their best song, then you've got your soundtrack laid out right there for you.
Right, of course, yeah, that totally makes sense. And working in the record store, all the cool bands are coming in there as well, presumably.
Precisely.
So